You've met this type of person before. They smile to your face while stabbing you in the back. They make big promises they never keep. They steal your ideas at work, spread gossip when it helps them, and can't keep a secret to save their life. They act loyal when you're around, but plot against you the moment you leave. When caught red-handed, they always have an excuse ready. I didn't mean it that way. You misunderstood me. Why are you so sensitive? This might be your coworker, your friend, or even someone you consider close. Someone who keeps getting away with this behavior again and again. A person who slowly chips away at your reputation, your position, your influence. And deep down, you might still believe their excuses. You keep tolerating what they do. You hope they'll change someday. 500 years ago, Machiavelli saw these exact same behaviors in the royal courts of Italy. He called them unacceptable behaviors, actions that no smart leader should ever put up with if they want to stay in power. He understood a hard truth many of us still struggle with today. Some behaviors aren't just annoying or hurtful. They're direct attacks on your position and power. These behaviors often seem small at first. They're cleverly disguised. They're easy to explain away. But behind this mask lies something darker. A calculated plan to bring you down while lifting themselves up. A willingness to hurt you for their own gain. These people expect you to forgive and forget. And when you do, they learn a simple lesson. Their tricks work on you. You'll tolerate what you shouldn't tolerate. You'll sacrifice your own position rather than stand up to them. This video isn't about complaining over small things. It's about protecting yourself. And if you're still watching, something in you recognizes these patterns. Maybe in someone at work, maybe in your social circle. You don't need to become paranoid or push everyone away to protect yourself. But you do need to face these unacceptable behaviors head on. Let's talk about how to do that now. Before we move further, do like and subscribe to my channel. It motivates me. Let's be brutally honest about what happens when you tolerate these behaviors. Each time you let someone undermine you, each time you accept their excuses, each time you turn a blind eye to their betrayals, you lose something precious. You lose respect. You lose influence. You lose power. And not just with the person who's testing your boundaries, but with everyone watching. Because make no mistake, people are always watching. They see who gets away with disrespecting you. They notice who you allow to take advantage of you. And they adjust their own behavior accordingly. This slow erosion isn't dramatic. It happens day by day, slight by slight, until one day you realize your words carry less weight. Your opinions are easily dismissed. Your position has been compromised, not by a single attack, but by 1,000 tiny cuts you allowed to happen. If you've ever tried to maintain your standing while someone constantly undermines you, you know how exhausting it is. You get tired of defending yourself against rumors, of watching ideas you shared in confidence suddenly become someone else's brilliant insights, of having to explain that no, you aren't being too sensitive when you object to being disrespected. And the cruelest part? The people doing this to you will make you feel guilty, as if you're the problem for noticing their betrayal, for wanting basic loyalty, for refusing to be their doormat. But the truth needs to be said. Machiavelli wasn't cruel when he advised against tolerating certain behaviors. He was practical. What looks like patience and forgiveness in your eyes appears as weakness and opportunity in theirs. What feels like taking the high road to you looks like an open invitation to others. This isn't about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone around you. It's about recognizing a simple truth that powerful people have understood for centuries. Some behaviors signal a fundamental disrespect that, once permitted, will never stop on its own. The person testing your boundaries today will cross them completely tomorrow. The colleague who takes small credit now will steal entire projects later. The friend who reveals minor confidences will eventually expose your deepest secrets when it serves them. Machiavelli observed the most powerful courts in Renaissance Italy and came to a clear conclusion. There are certain behaviors that, no matter how much you might want to excuse them, no matter how much you might hope people will change, you simply cannot afford to tolerate. Not if you want to maintain your position, not if you want to be respected, not if you want to protect what's yours. And that's exactly what we're going to examine now. The 7 specific behaviors that Machiavelli would warn us never to accept, and why even the most seemingly generous leaders knew to draw a hard line when faced with them. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince back in 1513, he wasn't trying to teach people how to be cruel. He was simply writing down what he saw during his years working in Italian politics. He watched powerful people rise and fall, and he noticed patterns in what made some succeed while others failed. Machiavelli learned something important that many people still don't want to believe. Being nice all the time doesn't keep you in power. Leaders who can't spot threats, who let others disrespect them, who forgive every betrayal, these leaders don't last long. In his day, losing power often meant losing your life. Today, the stakes might seem lower, but the same rules apply to your job, your relationships, and your reputation. You've seen these behaviors yourself. People who test your boundaries with small disrespects. Colleagues who break promises without thinking twice. Friends who say one thing to your face and something else behind your back. Teammates who quietly undermine your authority. These behaviors haven't changed in 500 years because human nature hasn't changed. The office politics you deal with today would look very familiar to Machiavelli. Machiavelli wasn't telling people to be mean. He was telling them to be clear about what they would and wouldn't accept. He knew that once you allow certain behaviors, they only get worse. Once you permit someone to disrespect you, it becomes impossible to stop. His advice wasn't based on paranoia, but on careful observation of how people actually behave. He lived in dangerous times when political mistakes could be deadly. But his insights work just as well in your workplace, your friendships, and your family. Wherever people gather, the same patterns emerge. The same testing behaviors occur. Machiavelli famously said a leader must learn how not to be good. He didn't mean being evil. He meant sometimes you need to set firm boundaries that others might criticize you for. Now let's look at the 7 specific behaviors that Machiavelli would warn you never to tolerate. These aren't minor annoyances. According to one of history's best observers of power, these actions directly threaten your position and must be dealt with firmly. Let's examine the first 4 dangerous behaviors and understand why Machiavelli would consider them completely unacceptable. There's something magnetic about Machiavelli's insights that still pulls us in centuries later. He cuts through polite pretense and speaks directly to power dynamics we all recognize but rarely discuss openly. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. The first behavior Machiavelli would never tolerate is public disrespect. When someone challenges you openly, contradicts you in front of others, or mockingly dismisses your ideas in a meeting, they're not just expressing disagreement. They're testing your position. They're signaling to everyone watching that your authority can be questioned without consequences. Machiavelli observed that rulers who allowed public disrespect quickly lost the respect of their entire court. Today, you might notice how a team member who publicly challenges their boss without repercussion soon finds others joining them. Or how a friend who openly mocks you will inspire others to treat you with less regard. Public disrespect is never just between you and that person. It's a performance for everyone else. The second unacceptable behavior is breaking promises without consequence. When someone makes commitments to you they don't keep, repeatedly missing deadlines, canceling plans last minute, failing to deliver on their word, and faces no real consequence, they're learning something dangerous. They're discovering that promises to you are optional while their commitments to others remain binding. Machiavelli noted how princes who allowed advisors to break promises without punishment soon found themselves surrounded by people whose word meant nothing. You see this today when colleagues repeatedly miss deadlines with you, but never with your boss. Or when friends consistently cancel your plans, but always show up for others. When you tolerate broken promises, you teach people that disappointing you costs nothing. The third behavior Machiavelli would warn against is revealing confidences. When you share sensitive information with someone who then passes it along to others, they've broken the most basic trust. Machiavelli considered this especially dangerous because information is power, and those who cannot keep secrets cannot be trusted with any meaningful role. In modern terms, this is the coworker who shares details from private meetings, the friend who tells others what you've confided the team member who leaks plans before they're ready to be announced. Each time, they reveal something told in confidence. They gain momentary importance at your expense. They position themselves as insiders while weakening your ability to control information flow. And when you allow this to continue, you signal that betraying your trust carries no cost. The fourth unacceptable behavior is taking credit for your work or ideas. When someone presents your concepts as their own, builds on your foundation without acknowledgement, or claims victories you helped create, they're not just being unfair. They're actively diminishing your value while increasing their own. Machiavelli observed how advisors who stole credit eventually replaced those they stole from. In today's world, this is the colleague who repackages your proposal as their own initiative, the team member who claims full credit for a group effort, the friend who adopts your insights without mentioning their source. Each time they claim your work as theirs, they build their reputation by stealing pieces of yours. And when you tolerate this theft, you teach them that your intellectual property is there for the taking. These four behaviors share something critical. They're rarely isolated incidents. They're patterns that, once accepted, only escalate. They test whether you're willing to defend your position or whether you'll sacrifice your standing to avoid conflict. But there are three more behaviors even more dangerous than these. Behaviors that strike at the very foundation of your influence and authority. Let's explore those next and understand why Machiavelli considered them fatal to anyone trying to maintain their position. In the beginning, everything seems manageable. The four behaviors we've discussed might appear as minor irritations rather than serious threats. But over time, that perception begins to fade. What was tolerable transforms into torment. What was inconvenient becomes impossible. And what seemed harmless reveals itself as deliberately harmful. It is at this point that the final three Machiavellian warnings become clear. These aren't just bad behaviors. They are existential threats to your position. The fifth behavior Machiavelli would never tolerate is forming secret alliances against you. When someone builds coalitions within your circle, turns others against you through private conversations, or creates factions that challenge your authority, they're not just being political. They're actively working to isolate and eventually replace you. Machiavelli saw how courtiers would whisper to each other, forming groups that could overthrow a prince who wasn't paying attention. In modern terms, this is the colleague who meets with others after hours to complain about your leadership, the friend who turns your social circle against you one person at a time, the team member who builds a shadow network of influence. They don't confront you directly. They weaken your base of support until you're standing alone. Each person they pull to their side is one less person in yours. And when you ignore these alliance-building efforts, you allow the ground beneath you to be hollowed out until it eventually collapses. The sixth unacceptable behavior is undermining your decisions after they've been made. When someone agrees with you in the room, but works against your direction once the meeting ends, questions decisions that have already been settled, or creates friction in implementing what's been decided, they're not just being difficult. They're challenging whether your words actually matter. Machiavelli observed that a prince whose orders were quietly resisted soon found themselves unable to govern at all. Today, this appears as the colleague who reopens closed discussions, the team member who slow walks your initiatives, the partner who agrees then does nothing. They create an environment where your decisions aren't final. They're merely suggestions that can be ignored, reworked, or sabotaged through passive resistance. Each time they undermine a decision, they chip away at your authority. And when you permit this behavior, you teach everyone that opposing you has no consequences. The seventh and most dangerous behavior Machiavelli would warn against is displays of false loyalty. When someone professes complete devotion while their actions show the opposite, praises you publicly while criticizing you privately, or claims to support you while actually serving their own interests, they're not just being two-faced. They're creating a perfect cover for betrayal. Machiavelli considered this the most lethal threat because it hides in plain sight, protected by a performance of faithfulness. In your world, this is the colleague who calls themselves your biggest supporter while working against you, the friend who expresses love while undermining your relationships, the ally who stands beside you only until a better opportunity appears. They don't just harm you directly. They destroy your ability to know who you can actually trust. Each false display of loyalty makes it harder to identify your real supporters. And when you accept this deception, you lose the most important knowledge any leader needs: who truly stands with you. These behaviors persist because humans are naturally conflict averse. We want to believe good intentions. We hope problems will resolve themselves. We fear confrontation more than we fear being taken advantage of. Machiavelli saw this human weakness in action: how people would tolerate what they should condemn because addressing it seemed too uncomfortable. How they would accept small betrayals until those small betrayals became complete overthrows. How they would pretend not to see what was happening right in front of them until it was too late. But time does not wait, and these behaviors, if left unchecked, only grow stronger. So what exactly should you do when faced with these 7 unacceptable behaviors? How do you respond without becoming paranoid or cruel yourself? This is exactly what we'll examine next: the Machiavellian approach to protecting your position without losing yourself in the process. There comes a moment when tolerance stops being a virtue and becomes a weakness. When these behaviors continue, you must ask yourself, how do I respond effectively without becoming what I despise? Machiavelli's answer isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity, consequence, and consistency. When someone disrespects you publicly, don't ignore it or explode. Address it immediately. We can disagree without being dismissive. This isn't about your ego. It's about showing everyone watching that respect is non-negotiable. For broken promises, skip the angry lectures. Simply adjust your behavior. Since this deadline was missed again, I've reassigned the project. No drama, just natural consequences that teach people your trust has value. With those who leak your confidences, Machiavelli recommends information control. Don't hope they'll change. Just stop sharing sensitive information with them. You don't announce this change or make it punitive. You simply protect yourself while they wonder why they're no longer in the loop. When someone steals credit for your work, don't complain behind their back. Create systems that make attribution clear from the start. Document contributions, acknowledge team efforts publicly, establish ownership early. This prevents theft rather than addressing it after the fact. For those building alliances against you, remember Machiavelli's famous advice to keep enemies closer. Build stronger relationships than your opponents, and occasionally show that you're aware of their maneuvering. This isn't paranoia. It's simply refusing to be outplayed. When decisions are undermined, focus on visibility. Create clear check-ins and public commitments that make resistance obvious to everyone. When someone agrees, then doesn't deliver, make it impossible to hide. For false loyalty, the most dangerous behavior: trust patterns over words. Watch what people do when it costs them something, not what they say when it costs them nothing. This isn't cynicism. It's recognizing that true loyalty shows in actions, not declarations. Machiavelli's core message isn't about controlling others. It's about refusing to be controlled. Sometimes standing your ground isn't harsh, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Protecting your position isn't cruel. It's the only way to ensure you remain effective against those who would undermine you without a second thought. Let's be real. Some people know exactly what they're doing when they disrespect you, break promises, or talk behind your back. And Machiavelli would tell you something simple: if you let them get away with it, they'll never stop. Look at your own life. Who makes you feel small in front of others? Who never keeps their word? Who pretends to be your friend while working against you? Once you see these behaviors, you can't unsee them. Machiavelli wasn't teaching people to be mean. He was showing them how to stop being taken advantage of. When you allow these 7 behaviors, you're not being nice. You're teaching people that disrespecting you has no consequences. The good news? You can change this starting today. You don't need to get angry or make a scene. You just need to be clear about what you will and won't accept from others. Your time, your respect, your position. These things have value, but only if you act like they do. If this video opened your eyes, hit the like button. If you want to learn more about protecting yourself from these behaviors, subscribe to the channel. Which of these 7 behaviors have you dealt with most? Tell me in the comments. Because as Machiavelli knew, Understanding the problem is just the first step. What you do next is what really matters.